Sather from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I will offer the pledge to our flag. If you please stand.
Our Father in heaven, we're indeed grateful for this opportunity that we have of meeting together this evening. We're grateful for this country and the freedoms that we enjoy here. Bless those who are protected and their families. We ask that you'll protect them and bless them for the sacrifice that they make for us. We ask thee at this time that thou wilt bless the commission. Bless them for the work that they do on behalf of the citizenry. We ask thee that you'll bless them also as they consider the petitions put before them this evening, that thou will grant them wisdom and insight into the future needs for our city. We ask you to bless those that come to present points to the commission, that they might be able to articulate their points well. We ask you at this time to bless all that are here, that when they return home, that they may find things well at home and with their families. And these things we pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
If you join me in the renewal of the pledge to our great republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Have the roll call, please.
Commissioners Kaveh Elihu, Randy Hall,
Here.
Cassandra Harvey, absent. Raj Mali,
Here.
Fabian Teresiano,
Here.
Vice Chairman Dan Jacobs,
Here.
Chairman James Bose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Public business from the floor. If an individual is unable to stay through the entire meeting this evening due to extenuating circumstances, a total of 10 minutes is provided at this time, during which input may be given regarding agenda items. Individual speakers would be limited to 2 minutes each. Do we have any early speakers?
We have no indications, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Therefore, any person who would like to address the Commission on any agendized item is requested to complete a speaker's card for the recording secretary and identify the agenda item you'd like to discuss. Each person will be given an opportunity to address the Commission at the time the item is discussed by the Commission. Speaker cards are available at the rear of the chamber and on your right, my left, adjacent to Deputy City Attorney Mr. Adams. Individual speakers would be limited to 3 minutes each. However, applicants for projects in their presentation have the opportunity to thoroughly explain the project and answer questions from the Commission. First item is our consent calendar, and that's approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 15th, 2011. May I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of August 15, 2011.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Please vote. Well, it passes 6-0 with Commissioner Harvey absent. That'd be my guess. Did it not record? Anybody vote no? All right, pass 6-0 with Commissioner Harvey absent. All right. Public hearings. The first public hearing tonight is an amendment to Lancaster Municipal Code, Title 17, for compliance with fair housing and disability laws. This amendment is brought forward by the City of Lancaster. And so without objection, the public hearing is open, and may we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Very briefly, these amendments would cover 3 items that need to be addressed within our residential zones in regards to fair housing law. The first, it would amend the code to specifically allow therapy animals within residential zones. The second thing that it would do, although we already routinely do this, is that for projects, particularly in multiple family situations, that require parking lots, that those projects would be subject to the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act as far as the number, marking, and location of disabled spaces. And the third thing that it would do is establish what's known as a reasonable accommodation procedure within the city's residential zones. And by that, I mean that if somebody has a situation, a defined disability, and in order to effectively use property, they would need some sort of a waiver or deviation from the normal development standards, that there would be a process in place to allow that to occur. The example I often give of that is if somebody, for instance, needed a handicapped ramp that extended into a normal required setback, this would establish a procedure to allow that to occur and provide them equal access to the property. We are recommending to you that you adopt a resolution 11-12 that would recommend these changes into the code to the City Council, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on it.
Thank you, Mr. Ludicky. Does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns? None. Do we have any speakers on this matter?
I have no speakers on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Then it would be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion on this matter.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 11-12, recommending the City Council to approve an ordinance to amend the zoning code of Title 17 of the Lancaster Municipal Code for compliance with fair housing and disability laws, including provisions addressing therapy animals for persons with disabilities. That would be section 17.08.310 of the code. Parking pursuant to the American Disabilities Act, section 17.08.140, and an ordinance for reasonable accommodation, section 17.08.400.
Thank you. Have a second, please.
I second.
Thank you. All right, then. Any further discussion? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, the next item is conditional use permit 08-10. This is a conditional use permit to locate a convenience market within an existing commercial building and the incidental off-sale of alcoholic beverages type 21 in a commercial zone. The applicant is Mr. Dargali, and this is a CUP that I guess started in 2008, as I recall. So, without objection, the public hearing is open on this, and we have received, for the record, an uncontested letter. Actually, we received uncontested letters on all the items here tonight. However, do we have speakers on this matter?
We have 3 speakers on this matter, Mr. Chairman. One is the applicant, 2 others who've indicated that they favor it.
All right. Then why don't you give us a staff report on this then, and then we'll hear from the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've noted, this case was continued indefinitely back in 2008 by the Commission. The applicant recently asked that it be reactivated and moved forward to you again. The request is for a convenience market as defined within the city's zoning code. Essentially, that is a establishment of less than 10,000 square feet in which at least 10% of the floor area is devoted to the sale of fresh meat and produce. As we've indicated to you in the staff report, based on the floor plans that the applicant has submitted, they would have approximately 1/3 of the total 3,000 square feet of floor area devoted to meat and produce. They are also proposing approximately 203 square feet as display and sales area for alcoholic beverages, which is approximately 6.8% under the 10% limit that the zoning ordinance calls for in terms of an incidental sale in conjunction with a convenience market. The issue, as we've indicated to you in the staff report, really comes down to do the benefits of the proposed conditional use permit case or use outweigh any potential negative effects that could occur as a result of it. As we've indicated to you in the staff report, this is defined as a high crime area within the city. Our stats indicate that within approximately a mile diameter, in other words, a half mile in each direction from the site, that in the past year, essentially mid-August to mid-August, there were approximately 235 Part 1 crimes within that area. We did route this through the Sheriff's Department. They presented to us conditions that, if approved, they would like applied to the project. We have included those in the recommended conditions. They did not, however, take any formal stand on the project, either in favor or opposed. From staff standpoint, we feel that the benefit of providing a form of fresh grocery outlet in this location, which, as you know, does not have one at the present time, would be a positive that we feel would outweigh any potential negative impacts from the additional sale of alcohol. We have indicated to you conditions that we feel would place reasonable restrictions on the sales, including, as usual, limits on single can or single container sales, as well as limitations on the type of product that can be sold. You may wish to review those, consider whether additional restrictions would be appropriate. We have recommended to you approval. We have provided you with those proposed conditions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Luedeke. Does anyone have any questions before we hear testimony on this? Pardon? Go right ahead, sure.
Has the applicant seen the conditions and agreed to the conditions presented?
The conditions as currently drafted in the report to you, they have indicated that they are in agreement with. Anything beyond that or that may come up as a discussion with the commission is something you would have to further ask them about.
All right, anyone else? Go ahead, Mr.
I do. On one of the conditions, it said you had to have silent alarm with 3 different buttons throughout. I don't believe I've seen that as a requirement before. Is that a special circumstance for this place?
That is one of the conditions that I believe came out of the consultation with the Sheriff's Department. Seems to be a reasonable approach within this area, given the fact that businesses at times may be targeted. The applicant, as I said, didn't indicate any resistance to that particular request, and therefore we've recommended it to you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then, shall we hear from the speakers, please?
Rami Dargali.
Good evening, Mr. Dargali.
Good evening.
And welcome. Go right ahead.
I'm just here to talk a little bit more about the project and answer any questions commission members may have. We've been working on this project for 3 years as I speak. The reason was pulled off calendar back in 2008. After Vallarta did relocate from that location cross street, they left a vacancy over there, and we were under the impression that another market was going to come in. That's one of the reasons why at that point we were debating on proceeding forward on this convenience market, because we thought that the area over there cannot handle to have a major store and a convenience market. I think this project will be a big plus for the area over there because of the convenience and because of the type of products that it does, we do sell. We do have 3 other stores in 3 different cities, which I did provide the planning staff with locations and photos and all I'm asking is to get this project approved at this point.
All right, sir. Thank you. There may be some questions. You mentioned that you you currently operate this business now,
Yes.
and what is the business that's being operated there now?
We have 3 locations.
At this particular location before us this evening, this particular store, is it an open and operating business?
Is this business operating right now as we speak, or?
Yes. At this location, is there something operating there now?
Right now, it's temporary. There's a tobacco store over there, which is operated by somebody else.
There's a what?
A tobacco store?
A tobacco store?
Yes.
Okay. So it's not your operation?
No.
Okay. So how do you propose to operate a business when someone is already there?
We are assuming a lease from the landlord to change the use over there to a different business.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. And you reviewed the conditions before us this evening,
Yes, I did.
and you've agreed to those.
Yes.
You previously operated under this Type 21 license another business in our city. Where was that located?
We have actually 2 of them. We have one on K and Challenger, well, that's a convenience liquor store, and we had one over on Beach and Avenue I before.
And that's where this Type 21 license was in operation, and now it's in suspense. Is that would be correct?
It's in suspense status, yes.
Right. And how long ago? And that was a liquor store.
Yes.
Okay. And how long has that business been closed?
It's been since September. It's been almost 1 year.
About a year.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me why this convenience market as proposed requires a Type 21 alcohol beverage license?
It's all about convenience, and we do like to have a product to accommodate, the sales. Having a convenience store, you always like to have pretty much all kinds of services to offer to the customers, and that's one reason why we're asking for a Type 21 license over there.
And the products you intend to sell there, you've looked at the conditions, which does not allow you to sell fortified wine, malt liquor, those types of products.
Yes, we're not going to be selling any of that stuff.
Okay. What about the size of containers for the liquor product?
Liquor product, we do have, we tend to sell all sizes on that.
Your license allows you to do that. No, I understand. What's your intent?
Mm-hmm.
What's your intent?
We tend to sell the 200 mLs, and that's be the smallest size, I guess.
So what would your reaction be if the commission decided to limit the size of the product that you're selling for liquor for containers other than cans described as 375 milliliters, 200 milliliters, 100 milliliters, or 50 milliliters or smaller. If we suggested that you don't sell those sizes, what would be your reaction to that in liquor? And while you're thinking about that, for metal containers which have the general shape and design of cans, which have a closure as an integral part, in sizes of 355 milliliters, 200 milliliters, 100 milliliters, or 50 milliliters or smaller, what would your reaction be to those?
One thing I do need to keep in mind is the area over there, I mean, we know it's a low-income area, and
You what?
low income as far as the people that live in the neighborhood over there. I don't think they can afford to buy the big sizes of liquor. What should we be talking about? The 750 and the liters and the half gallons. It's liquor will be in enclosed area where nobody will be able to, as far as customers, reach it, or it has to be served by one of the clerks over there. And that's the only reason I would ask to keep the small sizes, because people can't afford to, spend the money to buy the bigger
Who
size.
asked you to keep those small sizes?
I didn't hear.
Who asked you to keep those small sizes?
I'm just looking at it from a business standpoint.
Would that be from your experience on Avenue I at Beach?
Not really. They have nothing to do with this. It's a completely different use. This is a market. It's not a liquor store.
Well,
And-
if it's a market, then I can personally see no objection to limiting the size of what we used to call pints and half pints and short dogs and all those nifty little kinds of beverage containers that folks can slip in their pocket and put it in a lunch pail and take it to work, or put it in the boot of their car, or maybe in their glove compartment, or whatever. So you would object to having those limitations put on you?
Yes, because the whole concept is,
You understand if the commission imposes those conditions that you'd be stuck with them.
I understand that. I'm just trying to address my point, and it's all about convenience, and we need to offer people different sizes. We did agree to a lot of the conditions, which Mr. Ryan knows that we have no intent to. We'll be addressing all different issues, even with the customers, and we want to keep this a convenience market. Our intention not really to do a liquor store there, and
Okay.
just a small convenience market, that's all.
With small bottles of beverages that folks that abuse alcoholic beverages tend to gravitate to, in my opinion.
In my opinion, for many years, beer has been the issue with people buying, cans of beers, and
So those little 50 milliliter shots of Jack Daniels and all that sort of stuff, they don't buy those?
it's not that they don't buy them, but a lot of people like to have a drink every once in a while, and they don't mind buying a 50 ml, taking it home and drinking it instead of buying a 750. It's, I think it's more convenient.
From my experience, they get it home, frankly, but that's just my opinion. Okay, go ahead and say what else you want to say. If you have anything more to add,
That's it, I'm done.
anybody else have any questions?
I was concerned about the security. The police were obviously concerned by having you put in the silent alarm with the 3 buttons. Would you have any kind of video recording?
We will have a 16-channel DVR recorder 24 hours a day. Plus, we'll have cameras outside, too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have another speaker, Mr. Ludicky.
Barbara Newsom.
Barbara Newsom, was it?
Yes.
Good evening, Ms. Newsom, and welcome.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry.
Take your time. Take your time. We're in no
I'm a
hurry.
little old, so I don't move quite as fast as I used to, but I get here. For any of you that don't know who I am, I'm Mr. Dargali's administrative assistant. And as he stated, we have 3 of these stores in 3 different cities. We provided pictures of them. These are all very successful. And they're successful because of the neighborhoods that they're in. A lot of times, these particular neighborhoods, people don't have cars. Or maybe like me, you're getting where your driving days are about over. And I remember growing up as a child in a neighborhood that we had a little store like this with a meat market and everything. My grandmother didn't drive, but let me tell you something, she was at that store every day. When I first came to California, we also had a little store like that. These stores are a win-win. They're a win for the city because they create business. They also create jobs. They can create convenience for either the elderly, the unemployed, or underemployed, and heaven knows we have plenty of those, particularly in this particular area. So this is where you can go to get breakfast, or you can go to get dinner and say, well, it's Papa's birthday, maybe he'd like a cocktail tonight. And we can even do that too. We can get a money order to pay our rent, our utilities. We can buy a stamp to mail a letter if they're still letting us do that here recently. We're not too sure about that. And there's just a lot of services that we can provide for this neighborhood and for this city that's a win-win for everybody. Mr. Dargali, I don't know how many people really know who he is. He owns a number of businesses here. He's bought a bunch of the foreclosed homes and renovated them and is leasing them out at fair market or less than fair market value for folks that have lost their homes. He employs a lot of people. He does a lot of good. He's a very kind, gentle person. And all he wants to do is to open the store and fulfill a void that we saw. And he and I worked on this a long time as to how we wanted to set it up and how we wanted to do this and how we wanted to do that to make it comfortable. Thank you. Any
You
questions?
still have some more time if you care to.
Any questions, anybody?
There may be. So, I remember those markets too. I grew up in neighborhoods very similar to that. Matter of fact, I'm not the oldest person in the room, but I do have some experience in the retail business. I don't recall the purveyors in those circumstances selling alcoholic beverages in shot-sized bottles, nor tiny bottles. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do, particularly when I came to California. Some of the stores at home, yes, they did. No, they didn't. Some of them had small liquor stores that were owned by the same people, but they were kind of split side from it. But when I came to California, I was lucky enough to live in a neighborhood in North Hollywood that had a situation exactly like this one's intended to be. And let me tell you, on a Saturday morning, you could barely get in there to get to the meat market. And on Sunday, when they were playing football, that was the place everybody went to go get a six-pack of beer and bring it home. It was just so convenient having that store there.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you. You do?
Yeah, for Mr. Dargali.
Sorry.
I have some questions for Mr.
For the applicant? All right. Well, why don't we hear the last speaker, and then we can, if you have questions, then we can deal with them. We have another speaker.
I apologize in advance. Itasca Deini?
Yes, pretty close.
Would you say that again, please? Would you say your name again? I didn't hear it.
Itasca Deini.
Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of a very needed business in this particular neighborhood of our community. I've been a member of this community since 1985, and I've watched this community survive about 3 recessions. I've watched businesses come, I've watched them go, and I've watched them come again. Often in the process of going, we lose much needed tax revenue for our city, and our neighborhoods and portions of our community are being affected as a whole. Convenience of products and services are lost, and the costs of these losses often trickle down to the economically disadvantaged. Individuals, families, seniors on fixed or low incomes are hit the hardest, and I know about that from personal experience and firsthand knowledge, because 10 of the 26 years that I've lived here, I was one of those low-income individuals, single mother of 4, and head of household. To go an extra 2 or 3 miles from a neighborhood where I would be living, was just a hardship. The money was tight, transportation wasn't exactly what I would have liked it to be. So to be able to have a market in the area where I was living that was in close proximity, I could walk to it if the day was nice, a place where me and my family could become familiar enough for me to send my kids to get a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, that really did mean a lot. And even though I'm not living in that type of community now, I haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten the needs of my peers, fellow constituents, and the need of good business. Business that offers services and convenience for all of the constituents equally. We do all have the right to be serviced equally, and I've seen that thus far in this community. But I wanted to support this market because it is needed. There are no markets in the area, and I feel that all of the neighborhoods that are surrounding it from 2 to 3 mile radius would be able to benefit from being able to go there for fresh meats, produce, and yes, if you want an occasional bottle of wine with dinner, or you feel like having, an after-dinner cocktail, yes, it's there and it's available. And those services are offered in other places in various sections of this city, and why do we want to not offer it there? What would be the difference? There surely is no difference in biases in our community members. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. Any questions from anyone? Thank you. All right. So, any other speakers?
I have no other cards, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So, without objection, we'll close the public hearing. Do have some questions for Mr. Luedeke, however. Statements have been made relative to the availability of convenience shopping similar to the application that's before us this evening. As I recall, we recently approved a project on 10th Street West and Avenue I, a similar type project. Is that correct? 10th Street West and H, excuse me.
We approved a mini market there. I don't know that they carry the same kind of produce or meat type stuff. I remember in looking at it, we couldn't define it as a convenience market the way the code defines it. It came defined as a mini market.
I see. And the approval on the project just north of us here at City Hall on 10th Street West.
Yeah, I think that ultimately became a mini market also, if I'm remembering correctly. I think there were some issues, if I recall that applicant wondering if they could source produce and other stuff effectively.
Okay. How about the purveyors of alcoholic beverages in this high crime area on Avenue I? We've got a couple.
I believe there's a liquor store at 11th and Avenue I, 11th West and Avenue I. There's a mini market at what would be 13th, I think it's 13th, and Avenue I. And if you go eastward, there is a mini market that is at the northwest corner of Beach and Avenue I, as I recall.
There one at 15th?
Yes, further west there is one at 15th and Avenue I, southwest corner.
Those alcoholic beverage purveyors are existing nonconformants, right?
Yes, none of them was approved under the current alcohol ordinance. The only one that I believe received any kind of review from the city was under the basic mini market requirements, and that was the one at what would be 13th 12th or 13th and Avenue I. That one did go through a CUP process.
Some years ago.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I have a question for
Go ahead.
Mr. Ludicky. Is it normal for a convenience market to have the smaller containers of liquor for sale?
I have to admit I don't know the answer to that question. The only the closest thing that I can describe that in my personal experience to this was that when I worked in the city of Baldwin Park, there was a small market grocery store about 4,000 square feet that was within a short walk of City Hall, and it had meat, produce, rows of canned goods, and other kinds of things, but I can't honestly tell you what it sold in the way of alcohol,
Thank you.
since you could not buy it during work hours.
It's an interesting restriction. What are work hours? These days, that's 24/7.
At Baldwin Park, it
isn't
was 8 to 5.
And the sidewalks rolled up at 5:05, right? Okay.
Probably not for that store, I don't know. But it tended to have a lot of local shoppers that were buying groceries and so forth.
Noticed on your condition list, on item 1, you call out the exceptions to our standard resolution 10-23. Item 7, E like small e, Edward,
Yes.
talks about the fact our standard condition resolution requires trash enclosures. However, this proposed condition removes that requirement. As I recall, that center has had in the past challenges with trash disposal and the accumulation of trash, particularly in the alleyway. How do we propose to address that, or are we just not going to address it?
I don't know that a trash enclosure in and of itself would address the issue. In looking at the site, they have a number of trash containers, trash bins that are located. None of them, with the exception of the IHOP restaurant and I believe the small taco place that faces 10th Street West, as I recall, has their own exclusive enclosure, although there might be something kind of back in the very northeast corner. There is nothing immediately adjacent to this particular site or this particular building. However, if you go down the alley a little ways to the east behind the center, there is at least one bin that is located in that area that's kind of in that cutout area right there. This area is too narrow for anything, but there are bins in this area, and I saw one out in this area, as well as what's here and here.
Yeah, the way the building is sited, the portion, or the entire building, it's only a portion that's before us tonight. The way it's sited, that the rear door that exits into the alley, which I'm assuming the vendors would use to load and unload supplies, as well as, dump their trash and so forth. I mean, it's a very narrow alley. I mean, it's only basically a one-way direction at that point, is it not?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's about 20 feet in width, if that.
If that, yeah. Yeah, it's a challenging location. It's been there a long time. So, okay. Well, personally, I would suggest that we consider modification to the alcohol beverage sales conditions to limit the size of containers to no more than 200 milliliters in any alcoholic beverage, whether it be liquor or other. That is a change from the proposed condition that's before us, item number the whole alcoholic beverage issues. There's 21 conditions, so it would be an added condition if someone cares to offer that in their motion. If not, it's all right too. Anyway, any further questions of staff or questions or comments? Anyone? All right, then, and a motion would be in order then.
I move that we adopt Resolution 1113, approving conditional use permit number 08-10 with the additional alcohol conditions of no sales of distilled spirits in a container of less size than, for containers other than cans described as 375 milliliters, 200 milliliters, 100 milliliters, or 50 millimeters or smaller. For metal containers which have a general shape and design of a can, which have a closure which is an integral part of the container, and which cannot be readily reclosed after opening, described as 355 millimeters, 200 milliliters, 100 milliliters, 50 milliliters, or smaller.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion before we vote? Basically, if I understand the motion, then what that does is limit the container size to the standard beverage package of 750 milliliter or larger. Would that be correct?
That's on distilled spirits.
Distilled
as I understand
spirits.
it. Okay.
And then containers larger than 355 milliliters on other. That'd be right? I think there are 500 milliliter packages of wine and other beverages. I've seen
Yeah,
it.
I think 750 milliliters is a typical wine bottle, though, as I recall.
However, there are wine products sold in 500 milliliter packages.
Dessert or type wines or things of that type.
Yeah, they would be beverages other than distilled spirits.
Okay.
So we understand the motion? All right, ready to vote? Please vote.
Okay, motion passes 5-1
All right.
as with the added condition.
All right, thank you. All right, then the next item is item number 4. This is a conditional use permit 1102. The applicant is Absolute Solar, Inc., construction of a 3.4 megawatt photovoltaic solar electric generating facility in a rural residential zone in the city of Lancaster. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter. Do we have speakers on this matter?
I have no speakers cards on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and for the record, I mentioned it previously, we had received a uncontested letter indicating the applicant agrees to all the conditions as proposed. All right, so we have no speakers?
None on item 4, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any questions or comments from anyone? All right, then it'd be appropriate to close the public hearing and consider a motion on this matter.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I've been handed one, but I have no idea. It just didn't. Oh, never mind. It doesn't affect this one.
Okay, public hearing is closed on this item, conditional use permit 1102, and we would consider a motion.
I move to adopt resolution number 11-14, approving conditional use permit number 11-02.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Please vote.
Okay, motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. All right, next item, next public hearing item is conditional use permit 1103. This is an application from Silverado Power LLC to construct a 10-megawatt photovoltaic solar electric generating facility in a rural residential zone in the city of Lancaster. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter. And I understand, even though we have received a uncontested letter that the applicant wishes to make a presentation to the commission.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then. Who will be presenting? Good evening. And you are you folks are?
I'm Hans Eastern. I'm the COO of Silverado Power. This is Chris Wiedemann. He is our manager of sites and permitting.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. First of all, thank you for the time to speak. We're very excited to be here and excited about the possibility of doing business in Lancaster. We are a solar PV development company. Our team has financed over 50 solar projects around the world, and we're constructing over 150 megawatts of solar projects this year. We really applaud the city's goals of becoming the solar capital of the U.S., and we think that our projects are a great step to achieving this goal. We've spent about 2 years going out trying to find the absolute best sites for solar with low impacts. And we're bringing major investment to the area, culminating in over 100 jobs, and very minimal impact to water usage or to city services. So I know Chris is planning on walking you through some of the details of our projects.
Thank you, Hans. And thank you for having us tonight. I'm Chris Wiedemann. I manage Silverado's permitting and land acquisition efforts. So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of our development process, siting strategy, permitting, and local outreach. So as Hans mentioned, Silverado's been active in the area for over 2 years, identifying the sites that are before us tonight. We focus typically on previously disturbed land, which minimizes cultural, biological issues. We typically site next to existing transmission infrastructure and avoid obvious fatal flaws like SEAs, washes. The popular reserve was obviously a big one for us to avoid out the gate, so we try to avoid the things that other developers may not be as cognizant of, and I think we've been pretty successful with that. As Hans mentioned, we've been through dozens of sites in the area. We've narrowed the list down to the 3 before us tonight. We've conducted technical studies on all of our sites, and they've identified no biological, cultural, or hazardous material issues of significance at this point. This is a brief overview of the technology the project's utilizing. They're fixed-tilt photovoltaic. Many of you have probably seen one of these projects along Avenue 14 next to Kaiser Hospital. Similar technology, fixed-tilt typically, with the possibility of a tracking technology also, but ground-mounted, no power tower or solar thermal or anything of that kind. The ground-mounted installations use pile-driven mounting systems, so very low impact to the site, very little grading required. They don't generate noise. We're anticipating roughly 160 jobs created through the construction phase of all 3 projects, not just the one that we're discussing right now, but it'll be for the 3 tonight. And our goal is to source 85% of those locally, so we'll be, reaching out to as many local employees, contractors as possible. A few more project details. The projects will be fenced. The panels themselves are limited to 10 feet. The projects will be surrounded around the perimeter by native drought-resistant vegetation. We're working with the AV Conservancy to identify appropriate species around the projects, and a couple of them you see here, saltbrush and the western redbud, both of which we think will help the projects blend into the landscape and provide as minimal a visual intrusion as possible. Silverado has conducted extensive local outreach leading up to the application for a conditional use permit for this project. We've met with numerous local interest groups, project neighbors. We've been very mindful to listen to any concerns and to really make an effort to work with local groups to work together to move these projects forward. And certainly we look forward to continuing to build those relationships. We recognize that we're establishing a presence here for a long time, and we want to be good neighbors. So.
Very good, thank you. Your presentation actually addresses generally all three projects that are before us tonight, 1103, 1105, and 1106, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Typically, the way this works, we have received letters of support, which I'll read into the record, as well as letters in opposition to 1106. Letters of support for all three projects, letters of opposition for 1106. So typically what happens, so you know, and so that anyone wishing to address the commission tonight, folks are given an opportunity to speak. However, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut. Folks have an opportunity to speak on 3-minute intervals. The applicant has an opportunity to rebut at the pleasure of the commission. So that's how the system works, just so everybody's clear on that. Did you have any specifics you wanted to address on 1103?
Not at this time.
Okay. And you've read, you folks have agreed to the conditions that staff has recommended?
We have, and we agreed to them.
Right. And you have some potential cultural resource issues there, potential of historical significance?
There is...
a Swanson Hawk survey to do?
Correct. That is correct.
The other thing that struck me was the fact that and maybe you can explain it to us. There are sensitive receptors adjacent to 1103, Delsar School to your north, and a existing mini ranch single-family dwelling to your west. And your process of installation of the steel pipes are pile-driven. And according to your record, or to your application, you say you use a pneumatic technique similar to hydraulic pile driving. It indicates from the report that it's likely that the sensitive receptors will be hearing noise impacts in excess of 75 to 85 dBA. That'd be correct? That's what the report says. Make sure you all agree with that. Yes. I have some concerns relative to the school site, particularly to the Delsar School as you're involved with your construction in 2014 as you've anticipated, right? That's when you're anticipating starting this project, maybe?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the deadline to bring the project online as a condition of our power sales contracts is in 2014, but our plan is to construct starting in the summer of 2013 and wrapping up by the end of 2013.
And the way the approval document are proposed, if I understood you correctly, and maybe you could restate it, you're proposing a fixed structure as opposed to an actuated structure. But your application and what is being proposed for us to approve gives you the flexibility of going either way. So what are you asking us to prove tonight? Because your presentation said it was fixed. Which would it be?
Our intent is to construct a fixed tilt racking system, We would appreciate the flexibility to move to a single-axis tracker. Right now, what we're seeing is fixed tilt systems are slightly more competitive in the marketplace, but as technologies change over the next couple of years, that is a consideration that we would appreciate having.
So your request is to approve it as recommended?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And that structure, potentially at its maximum height from ground level is 14 feet, according to your plan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe that the condition is for 14 feet, but our intent is to be at 10 feet or below.
10 feet overall?
10 feet or below, yes.
Okay. All right. So how are you going to address the noise impacts to Del Sur School while you're constructing this project and school's in session?
That's a great question. So we have met with the school principal and the school superintendent to discuss the project. Went over a few of the concerns. As you're obviously aware, there's a proposed solar project also across the street, the Beautiful Earth Group project. We are very interested in working with the school to address the concerns that were raised for that project regarding construction traffic and construction noise and those sorts of things. We're very open to working with them with scheduling and around school hours.
See, you folks haven't really addressed the method of installation of the piers yet, or the posts, I should say, with the district.
We focused more on the traffic impacts of the project than the actual installation. So,
And how many thousand posts are in this first one? Many thousands,
there
right?
will be quite a few.
And they typically go and they're typically 5 or 6 feet above ground and 10 or 12 feet below ground, maybe?
I would say that would depend on the soil, but potentially. We haven't, we don't know how deep they'll have to go, but it could be that deep.
Could be noisy.
It could be noisy.
But you could also maybe schedule the work really when school may not be in session.
Absolutely.
Breaks in summers and that sort of thing.
I think our intent currently is to construct during the summer months. These construction methods are becoming so modular and efficient that,
You still have to drive those posts in the ground, though.
Oh, you certainly do. You certainly do. But we're willing to work with the school to not be disruptive.
Imagine Superintendent West Side School District, Regina Rosso, will be more than happy to chat with you about your schedule and their schedule so that the impacts are minimal. All right, thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments from anybody? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any speakers on this project, Mr. Ludicky?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on agenda item 5, CUP 1103, I have 3.
All right.
Dennis Swanson.
All right, Mr. Swanson.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome.
I'm Dennis Swanson, and I'm a half owner of the property. I've owned it since 1980. The whole area is under transition out there, as everybody kind of knows, and it hasn't been farmed since 1965, and nothing else has gone on, basically, except for one housing tract. So I think this would be a favorable project. It's clean, and you get a lot of folks who don't want this sort of thing as it in their backyard, but they do want it as a general good thing for the community. So I would just like to support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. The next speaker, please.
Mel Lane.
Mel Lane. Good evening, Mr. Lane. Welcome.
Chairman Bose, good to see you again. Mr. Ludicky and members of the commission. My name is Mel Lane. I'm the president of the Greater Antelope Valley Economic Alliance that was created about 10 years ago to bring businesses to the Antelope Valley. And not only bring businesses, but to retain and grow the businesses that are here. We've worked hard to help those renewable energy companies come into the area here. And early on, we brought in about 150 developers that worked to look at the project out at Edwards, which is about a 540 megawatt one. Total project value of those projects which we have helped with are around $6.5 billion investment, which is a huge investment in the area. This project that we're talking about, or the three projects, are a 50 megawatt, which will produce about 10,000, enough for about 10,000 homes. Overall, the projects that we've worked with will produce about 8,000 megawatts. About 800,000 of those are in LA County. And actually, 8,000 megawatts is enough to produce enough electricity for all the single-family dwelling houses within LA County. We feel that this is a very good project for the area. It's a reliable energy source. It's a proven technology. And we think it will help the state of California as well as the city of Lancaster meet its renewable energy goals. As you know, we've lost a lot of jobs here, and a lot of them in construction. And while this is not a high job project per se, I would have to say that we hope that it will be, it is something that is working today, and it's something that's bringing jobs to the area, which are definitely needed. And we hope that we'll bridge the gaps between now and when the housing market may become viable again. A large percentage of the employees that they will be hiring will live here in the Antelope Valley, and we think that's great for businesses here. The land is unproductive and has been sitting there for a number of years, and we feel that this is probably a highest and best use. It's probably a better use than farming, which is a high water use, and also housing. So we think it's a great project for the Antelope Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Have another speaker.
Leroy Melanson.
Yes.
Mr. Melanson, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, and good evening and welcome.
Welcome. I have a few concerns about the project. Well, the home is right in the middle of the project, right on the edge of it, and I have a map of it. The house has been built since 1935. One of the major concerns I have is about the grading. When they start grading the dirt, the property of the wind is going to blow there up on the home. And also the drilling there is going to create a lot of noise and maybe bring damage to a house that has been built since 1935 there. Also, the value of the home will decrease greatly, because we won't be able to sell that home in the future for someone who probably wouldn't want to buy a home next to a place like that. I'm very concerned about that, and they came and made an offer on the home for $30,000 an acre. It's a 5-acre home. They offered $30,000 per acre on that particular home, and we owe $240,000 for the house. That's $150,000. That's not, being friendly to your neighbors. I see that I think that this project can do good, but they have to be considerate about people who've been living there for a long time. And they must consider, or at least make a fair offer to the people who do live right in the middle of it, and where the value of the property will be destroyed and won't worth any much money. One of the major concerns that I have is the value of the property, and the grading, and the drilling, that might cause damage to the home and the dirt that will be blowing from that. So I just think that I would urge y'all to take a good look at it and consider the people who've been living there for a long time, especially this particular home right here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from anyone? Is that
No more speakers on
more
this
speakers?
item.
All right. And would the applicant care to offer any rebuttal to the and answer any of the questions that were raised? Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to address a few of the concerns that were raised. First of all, the concern of dust on the site during construction. I'd like to point out that these projects require minimal grading on the site, so it's not like a solar thermal project where you have to laser level the whole site. What we'll be doing is called grubbing, removing all the vegetation, and then creating access roads for fire access. That would be the extent of the grading on the site. Most of it would be left intact. Native vegetation would be allowed to return to the site after the installation goes in. And during construction, we would, of course, be abiding by dust plans. Water would be used to minimize dust, and we'd be following all protocols in that regard. So I hope that will address the dust concerns. We have heard those concerns before, and we certainly intend to minimize the dust produced on the sites. We discussed the project. We met with Rick Schwebke, the owner of the house, who is in the middle of that island there. We met with him and discussed the project at length and went over the details. He did have some concerns. His major concerns, to my understanding, were the visual impacts that the project would have on his home, which we're working with him to address, and we'll make sure that those are addressed to his satisfaction. We did discuss with him, just to clarify one point, values that are typically offered for a solar project at sort of the upper end, to see if that would be something that would interest him. And he, of course, said that it would not. And we didn't think that it would, but we did want to at least have the conversation with him. So it wasn't, I guess I would just like to clarify that we weren't trying to lowball him on the property. We were just discussing property values, that's all. As far as property values, we'd like to think that there are numerous infrastructure improvements that go along with these sites, road improvements, the landscaping around the sites, the fact that we're creating real estate activity in the area, which, I think all of these things are typically associated with improved property values rather than decreased values. So I suppose I would offer that as a rebuttal to the concern to decreasing values.
All right, thank you. There may be questions. Anyone? Go ahead.
How big is that parcel of land that single-family residence is located on?
That is a 5-acre parcel. It's 10 acres total. There are actually 2 parcels in there, both 5 acres.
Thank you.
But the house itself is not 5. Okay. Any other questions?
So there's one dwelling on the little notch 10 that's sitting there?
That's correct. It's the kind of the white dot. You can see it on the northwest corner.
All right. All right. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then, no further speakers. All right, then it'll be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection. And we have a recommendation before us. Any questions of staff? All right, then. May I have a motion, please?
I move that we adopt resolution number 11-15, approving conditional use permit number 11-03.
Thank you. Have a second, please.
Second that.
Thank you. All right. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
No. 5-1.
Excuse me.
Commissioner
My mistake.
Ely voted no. That'd be right? That's correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item before us, item number 6, is conditional use permit 11-05. Same applicant that's been before us just now. And this is a construction of a 20-megawatt photovoltaic solar electric generating facility in a rural residential zone of the city. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this matter. And for the record, we have received a uncontested letter on this. Do we have speakers on this, Mr. Ludicky?
Yes, I have one card, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Then could we have a brief staff report?
Chairman Bose and Commissioners, the proposed project is a 20-megawatt solar photovoltaic development on 80 acres located on the east side of 80th Street West between J4 and J8. The surrounding properties on the site are completely vacant. Access to the property would be taken off of 80th Street West. With respect to impacts on the site, there are noise mitigation measures that have been identified to keep the noise impacts on the site and not affect uses that may be further away. Biological impacts with respect to burrowing owls and nesting birds, they need pre-construction surveys. They also need to mitigate for approximately 340 alkali Mariposa lilies that are located on the southeast corner of the project site. There are also conditions with respect to well closures if said walls are identified during construction of the proposed project. The project would tie into the existing transmission lines that are located on Avenue J via a Gentile line from the northwest corner of the project site. If you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Just for the record, the initial study indicated a 39-acre site, however.
That was a typo on my part?
Just for the record, it is 80 acres.
Correct.
And it talks about undisturbed land, however, some of the studies indicated it was likely used for grazing, and there were hitching posts and water troughs somewhere on the site.
According to I believe the Phase 1, that's what it said. However, the site has never been developed for actual uses. So there's quite a bit of native vegetation on the site.
And plenty of alkali Mariposa lilies. All right, thank you. Any questions of staff? We have a speaker.
James Petty.
You say James Petty, Mr. Petty?
Yes.
Is it? Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good, sir.
I'm concerned about this going in so close to a lot of houses right in there. Not a lot, but enough. We have property about 320 foot northeast of the site that's proposed, and we have 5 acres, and we're thinking about building on that site. Now, with this going in, that maybe I probably would have considered maybe building on that site. There is houses currently about 600 foot from that site, and I'm concerned about property values dropping or not even be able to sell property seems like it's going more of an industrial site now, if they're going to develop around the area with solar. And I'm not opposed to solar. I work for a power company down below, so I know all the benefits of it, and I know it's quite efficient. It's good for the earth and Lancaster in general, and that's not a problem. And like I said, I'm just a little concerned about being so close, and also other proposed solar sites around the immediate area that could affect my site itself. And we were never opposed with the offer on our property, and that would have maybe have played in in their decision making of keeping this property to develop. And that's pretty much what I got. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? All right, thank you. Other speakers, Mr. Ludicky?
Not on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So the mitigation for the 300 and ever how many identified alkali and Mariposa lilies, the cash contribution into the trust.
That is correct.
That's the appropriate mitigation under the mitigation monitoring program that we impose on any development that would be impacted by the alkali Mariposa, right?
Yes, we established that approximately 5 or 6 years ago and have followed that throughout.
Okay, and the land use here is rural residential 2.5, so 37 units could be developed or more or less on this property.
Yes, if everyone did about 100,000 square foot lot, yes, they could.
It would be the approximate development with 37 families and related infrastructure.
Correct.
Including roads, streetlights, curbs, gutters, sidewalk, walls, who knows?
Yeah. Somewhat limited in rural areas, but certainly paving and things of that type.
As opposed to this proposal.
Yes.
Some have described photovoltaic as almost a holding use with a shelf life of 20 to 35 years, maybe, depending on the technology. So it's at all possible, certainly not in my lifetime, but that if this project is developed at sometime in the future, assuming the land use stays the same, that it could cycle back into some form of residential development.
Yes, you make a very valid point. One of the things, certainly, as we look at these, is that the way these projects are constructed, unlike a typical residential development or something of that type, they don't necessarily preclude future use of the land. Obviously, development as a subdivision or even a scattering of single-family houses often precludes future use of the land in any effective way, particularly agricultural, just from the grading and other kinds of things that occur.
In the rural residential, land use zoning is our lowest density in the city, is that correct, for residential?
The zoning on this is, yes. It's the least dense.
All right, thank you. And I did mention we had letters of support. I didn't actually say who they were, and I probably should mention that. This would be, we have letters of support for all three projects from the Lancaster, the two chambers partnering, which is the Lancaster Chamber of Commerce and the Roseman Chamber of Commerce. We also received from the Greater Antelope Valley Economic Alliance, which Mr. Lane spoke to, letter of support. We also have a letter of support from Aero Transit Mix here in the community on all three projects. So it's just for the record. And we also obviously received letters from the applicant and their material as well. So make sure it's on the record. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a
Go ahead.
question for Mr.
Go ahead.
Lukey. Rural residential zoning that is there, does that allow homeowners to install photovoltaic panels of their own in a manner similar to this project?
Yes, it wouldn't preclude that. I don't know that an individual homeowner would go quite this way. I guess the one distinction I would make is that for a homeowner who installs PV solar, the intent is that it's primarily designed to meet the uses that they generate on site, whatever those may be, and any additional excess is kind of secondary to what they do. The difference, of course, with the conditional use permit application is that these projects are intended for commercial power generation, whereas something installed as part of a single-family residence really isn't.
Thank you.
These uses under our current regulations can be in residential zones, in rural residential zones, in certain industrial zones, and certain commercial zones.
Actually, I don't believe they can be in commercial. Commercial would allow the installation of what they call behind-the-meter type projects, solar shade structures, things of that type, but are not really intended to be commercial generating types of things.
Similar to the Kaiser project.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Anything else? So it would be appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion on this matter.
I make a motion that we adopt resolution number 11-16 approving conditional use permit number 11-05.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, the next item is conditional use permit number 1106, the same applicant, Silverado Power LLC. This is a project to construct a 20 megawatt photovoltaic solar electrical generating facility in a rural residential zone in the city of Lancaster. So, without objection, the public hearing is open. I know we have speakers on this in opposition. So, for the record, we received 2 letters that I'm aware of. Maybe there's more, but I only have 2. One from Mr. Mead, indicating he represents 98 families in opposition to the project, and then another from Morrison, Virginia Redding, indicating they're opposed to the project. Maybe we have a staff report on this, and a brief staff report on this. Thank you.
Chairman Bose and Commissioners, the proposed project in front of you is a 60-acre photovoltaic facility bounded by East Avenue J, 95th East, Avenue J8, and depending on what boundary line you're looking at, either 92nd or 93rd Street East. The properties surrounding the site immediately surrounding the site are predominantly vacant, with the exception of the property to the north, which contains single-family residences, and the property not immediately adjacent, but a little bit ways to the east, which is also a single-family residence. The project would either be fixed or singled or / dual access tracking, depending upon the technology chosen. The panels will be estimated to be about 10 feet tall with a maximum height not to exceed 14 feet. The project site will be completely fenced and landscaped between the right-of-way and the fence line with approximately 10 feet of landscaping. Access to the site would be taken off of East Avenue J or 95th Street East. The project site was previously an agricultural site. It is considered prime farmland under the Farmland Mapping and Conservation Act. However, the removal of these 60 acres represents a very minor percent of all farmland within LA County. They will be required to comply with all dust control measures. There are no biological resources on the site. However, they will do a pre-construction survey prior to any vegetation removal or grading to ensure that nothing has moved onto the site since the last surveys were conducted. They are also required to close any wells that they find on the site that they will not be using during the operation of the proposed project. I would be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hall.
It says here that there is active agricultural fields directly to the south.
To the south, you can see it. It doesn't show up as green on the site. However, that is Bolthouse Farms.
And that's carrots or onions or?
Something along those lines, yes.
So that's actively farmed with the plows and the
Correct.
watering and the, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. The bio requires nesting bird survey or just the burrowing owl, or both? But no Mojave ground squirrel issues since it's been cultivated 14 times.
I will answer as soon as I have the file given to me.
I don't have it either. That's why I'm asking the question.
One moment. They only need a pre-construction burrowing owl survey.
Thank you. All right then. Any other questions before we? Typically, we ask the applicant if they wish to offer comments, and I'm going to assume that your previous comments, the applicant's previous comments, stand for this project as well, or do you wish to add anything before we proceed with other testimony?
Thank you, Commissioner, Chairman. I would like to actually add just a few points on this particular site.
You go right ahead then.
Thank you. I think Jocelyn did a good job of introducing the project. It's 60 acres, 20 megawatts. It is former farmland. It's not currently being farmed, but it is heavily disturbed. The same improvements go for this site as for the others, obviously landscaping, road improvements around the perimeter, that sort of thing. And a couple of points, I guess. Chairman Vos, I think you put it well in the sense that you said these projects can kind of be viewed as placeholders. I agree with that in the sense that the use of the site is not altered permanently. The impact's very low. pile-driven, racking systems that can be inserted and then pulled out at the life of the project very easily for it to return to either an agricultural or residential use. And I think that's an important consideration here, considering the current agricultural use. I would also point out that the current zoning is not going to change for the project. For the site clearing, because there is some brush on the site currently, we will not be using any chemicals to clear the site. It will only be what was referred to as grubbing previously, but just a standard physical removal of the shrubs and brush. And I think for this project as well, there are some concerns about the effect on property values. I think what I said previously in terms of the infrastructure improvements and the activity in the local real estate market, these are things that are typically associated with an increase in property values, and we hope that the project will have that effect. That's all.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
I do. I have a question about your construction techniques. It's interesting that you're not going to be out there with great big graders and dozers and stuff. So would you say that your construction technique would have less impact on the land than, say, the farm to the south?
Well, during the life of the project, I think it essentially will. One of the reasons grading is not required is because these sites are so flat. They've been farmed for years. They have to be flat to be irrigated, and it's just sort of the nature of the site to begin with. So, in fact, when the project goes in, the only real disturbance will be to the access roads for maintenance and that sort of thing. The areas between the rows will remain intact and will not be disturbed or graded for the life of the project.
Do you have any way to describe how you would do the dust control so we could, because we're infamous for our wind as well as our sunlight?
Absolutely. Are you asking about during construction or post-construction?
I'd like both.
Both. During construction, we will be using water. Water trucks will be visiting the site and dusting the roads and the grading, conforming to all standard dust control measures. For post-construction, I believe the compaction of the roads will be such that it's not going to be essentially loose dirt, if that makes sense. It'll be compacted and should not create any dust. And the traffic on the site is so low, we estimate panel cleanings twice a year for these projects. So essentially it'll be, once every 6 months a truck will come out and clean the panels, and other than that there will be very little disturbance to the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have speakers on this, Mr. Ludicky.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Douglas Mead.
Mr. Lee. Evening and welcome, sir.
Good evening, Chairman. Chairman Bose and Commissioners, as stated by you, Chairman, I represent 98 families and landowners in the capacity as President of the Board of Directors of the Aqua-J Mutual Water Company, servicing a neighborhood bounded by 90th Street East, Lancaster Boulevard on the north, 95th Street East, and East Avenue J on the south. Our neighborhood is directly across Avenue J from the proposed 60-acre project. I am voicing the views of our neighborhood and those of property owners immediately outside our neighborhood that have sought me out and asked me to have their voices heard. Of utmost importance is the dilution of our rural residential way of life. Once industry is permitted into the area, it is almost axiomatic additional will be allowed. None of us moved out to our neighborhood to be closer to where we work or be part of an industrial neighborhood. Our investment was in a rural way of life. The introduction of industry to the area will most assuredly have an adverse effect on our property values. In the subject neighborhood, properties have dropped 55% in value since October of 2005. You are now proposing a project contiguous to our neighborhood that will cause property values to be further negatively impacted. Additionally, The proposed project is directly over the aquifer, supplying potable water to us and many downstream. The current project may not directly tap the aquifer, but future projects may. We are united in our vehement opposition to the proposed solar project. The land has, as recently as 2010, been farmed and is traditional farming land. Back into the 50s for sure, as far back as I can remember. And it has been graded off, it is flat, and as a group of neighbors, we strongly believe in the concept of renewable energy. We are opposed to the site selection, however.
Thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions of the speaker? Nope. All right. Next speaker, please.
Sharon Griffing.
Is it Griffing? Yes. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm a resident about half a mile to the east on the northern side of East Avenue J. The first we heard about this project was when the sign appeared on J stating that the CUP would be requested. I have a small farm. I'm surrounded by alfalfa fields, other farms. It's an ecosystem in the desert. We have Joshua trees, hawks, ravens, kangaroo rats that you mentioned, desert hares, coyotes, fruit bats, and all kinds of lizards and snakes. Some of you might not appreciate, but being interested in nature, I am, and my family is. It's a fine balance. As a resident of the unincorporated LA County, of course, we cannot vote in Lancaster elections or things that happen out here. However, we do business, we work, we shop, etc. in Lancaster, and we would like our opinions and our concerns to be considered. We would request an environmental and biological survey be done because of the fact that it is a beautiful ecological area with many sources. The colleges bring groups of people out or students to come out and study the area. We were concerned about possible chemical use. However, Ms. Swain did tell me that the ground would neither have chemicals nor be graded in that area. I'm hoping that this is so because the wind blows from the west to the east. We have a very fine dirt out there. There's always going to be soft dirt and areas. Also, there's the tumbleweeds, there's trash. All of this is going to build up into an area that has the fences and all of that around it. It would need to be cleaned up. Let's see, I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be at school right now. We want to know how you're going to grade or how you're going to clear that land. What is going to happen if anything's going to disrupt our wells. Most of the properties have our own wells. And again, I love the area. I love living here. We've been here for 6 years. And yes, as soon as 2010, that area was being farmed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. There may be some questions. Anyone? Just so you know, you raised the issue of biological evaluation and environmental review, and the staff report is clear that those items have been addressed. And in fact, I don't know if you had an opportunity to review them, but they are available here in the agenda item as well as on the city website.
Thank you.
And the project has been advertised per code as required by law. So.
Okay. I guess the AV Press will not deliver to us because we are too far away.
Yeah, that's not an issue before.
So it was simply a sign we saw.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, we have another speaker, Mr. Luke.
Yes, Jeremy Chisholm.
Mr. Chisholm, is it?
Yes.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. I just have a couple things that I noted during this. They said that they're going to be driving poles into the ground, and then that they're able to move them or to take them out later on in life. I don't know if any of you ever put a pole in the ground for more than 5 years out in that area. It's not coming out. It's going to come out in pieces. They literally have no idea what it is, but I guess it basically just gets rusted through. So you made a mention of them going in 10, 15 feet, and there is a good chance that about 2 feet's coming out. So I was just curious about, like, if they do that, what's going to happen if they go to build something there and they now have to go out and dig an extra 13 feet of pipe out of the ground? I wanted to know about that, and also, as she pointed out, all the wind will blow all this trash. I see trash flying by that area all the time, and I was just curious about all the different things that'll happen for it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. We have another speaker, Mr. Ludicky.
Those are all the speakers. Those are all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I see. All right, thank you very much. Would the applicant care to address the issues that were raised by the speakers?
I would. Thank you. And I appreciate Ms. Griffing's and Mr. Chisholm's comments. I'll address the issues, I guess, in sort of a general sense. In terms of dust control, as we've discussed before, construction will be controlled using water, post-construction compaction of the roads. And due to the low site traffic, I think the dust generated on the site will be minimal. Ms. Griffing raised the issue of bio and cultural studies. Bio and cultural studies have been conducted on the site, and they have revealed they haven't identified the presence of any significant biological issues, largely due to the fact that the site was historically farmed. So we're fairly confident that there won't be a disruption of the local ecosystem from the project, and obviously we'll follow up with the surveys pre-construction as well. I would like to point out also that the site is very low maintenance in terms of operation, but it will be maintained regularly. There won't be trash buildup. We'll be removing tumbleweed that blows against the fences. Our intent is to keep the site completely clean and trash and refuse free. So there will be regular maintenance on the site. To address Mr. Chisholm's concern about the piles that will be driven, the exact type of pile that we use is something that will be determined in the geotech analysis. But I can tell you that there are different alloys that can be used that are corrosion resistant, and that it's certainly not in our interest or our investor interest to use an alloy that would corrode over the life of the project. So whatever it is that we use, we're going to make very sure that it doesn't corrode, not just for what happens after the project, but because we don't want these things corroding during the life of the project. So that's certainly something that will be addressed when we identify the piles.
The other item that was raised by the first speaker, Mr. Mead, identifying this project as an industrial project. Would you address that, please?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate Mr. Mead's comments as well. A couple of points on the concern for industrial use, which I understand. The zoning of the site is not going to change. So as we've discussed tonight, I think essentially the project's very low impact. It's hard to compare it to, say, a warehouse or another sort of industrial use that's coming in. It's something that we believe and we intend to impact the site as minimally as possible to retain the existing foundational structure of the topsoil and all those sorts of things. So, I think it's not exactly a fair comparison, in my opinion, because I think the impacts of our project to the site are much lower. And as has been pointed out, we'll be able to remove the project at the end of the project life, and the site can return to its previous use without disturbance.
You have any idea how many acre-feet of water was used per year to farm this piece?
I could give you a ballpark. I would guess about 100.
And if this was 26 single-family on 2.5 acres, that would be, what, an acre-foot per year, so it's about 26 acre-feet. And what do you use, about 1/10 of an acre-foot per year to clean your panels?
It may be a bit more than that, and I think we're a little conservative in our estimates. We're guessing maybe 2 to 3 acre-feet, something in that range, but still significantly lower than residential or agricultural use.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mead brought up that he was concerned about the values of his property, but I was wondering if, when you bought the water for dust control and stuff, would you be buying it from the Aqua J Mutual Water Company, or did you have another source in mind?
That's something that we're still investigating. So, we haven't actually contracted for water yet. So I think it's something that we'll be looking for.
You already answered it about the tumbleweeds and trash, but I was curious if you would have somewhere on the fence where a neighbor could call in the area and say, is that normal planned, that you'd have something like that? Because you probably have a schedule, you come out to look.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, there could be other things that could happen in the meantime, and a neighbor could call. And would you have a phone number for them?
We'd be open to that. We haven't quite gotten that far logistically, but absolutely. I mean, certainly if there's an eyesore, we want to take care of it.
The one lady brought up the point about the ecosystems with the alfalfa fields, and since I've been born and raised in Antelope Valley, one of the nicest things that you can do is drive by an alfalfa field in the evening. It's very cool and nice, and it really does change the surrounding area. And would a PV farm like you're going to build here, would it have any kind of adverse effect? Would there be something coming off of it that would be disruptive? Would it be as noticeable as an alfalfa field?
I can't guarantee you that it'll have as pleasant an ambiance as an alfalfa field, but I think as far as visual impacts go, we're trying to make it blend as much with the local scenery as possible, so I don't think the visual intrusion will be significant. Dust will be controlled, obviously. So I think really the overall intent is just to make the project as quiet of a neighbor as possible and to blend in.
So you think that the field will be more like a barren piece of land would feel other than an alfalfa field, so there really wouldn't be any impact noticed from another field that would be next to it, like, say, the one to the west?
I don't believe so, no. Other than, obviously, the landscaping and the fencing. It shouldn't have a significant difference.
And your landscaping is going to be pretty much without needing water or very little water other than just to get it started up?
That's correct. That's one of the reasons that we're working with the Conservancy, is to identify plants that thrive in this environment.
There was one thing that was brought up about disrupting the wells. Is there any possibility that driving those poles in could disrupt the wells that are generally in that area?
I wouldn't imagine so. I would imagine those wells need to be capped at a certain height below the surface, assuming a maximum depth of maybe 14, 15 feet for the piles. I don't believe it would go low enough to have an effect.
I brought that up because my sister lives up next to the mine that they're getting ready to open in Mojave, and with the drilling and blasting they're doing up there, she's concerned about her well. And so I would imagine that pile driving that they're using is going to be considerably less impact than the amount of...
We won't be doing any blasting. I would assume so. I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Question.
Go ahead.
Earlier you said, if I'm not mistaken, you said that a project such as this would impact the property values in a positive way. Is that correct?
Well, studies have not been conducted to assess the impact of these projects on adjacent property values, but it's our belief that with the improvements that we're making to the roads and local infrastructure and creating a clean landscaped site and creating market activity in the area, that these are all things that are typically associated with increased property values, and we believe them to be beneficial.
Okay, I want to see where you're going with that.
Okay.
All right, anything further from anyone? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, then, we're finished with the speakers then, and so it would be appropriate then to close the public hearing without objection. Anyone have any questions or comments of staff? Anyone? All right then. So it would be appropriate to consider a motion on this matter.
I move that we adopt resolution number 11-17, approving conditional use permit number 11-06.
Thank you. Have a second, please?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. That concludes the action items tonight. We have a couple of other items on our agenda. On the commission discussion, just a comment that we had at our meeting last week, at our staff meeting last week, we conducted a work study, if you will, on the sign regulations in the city of Lancaster, and the commission, by consensus, directed staff to begin a process of evaluating the sign regulations in the city and to further investigate with the commission a review of the sign regulations associated with temporary signage and other sign regulations in the city. It's likely that this review will take a year or longer, and the members will be engaged in various work study programs, as well as taking public input and engaging the community in a broad-based review of our sign regulations and taking input from those members of the community that are interested in discussing those regulations with the Planning Commission. Ultimately, there's a potential that the regulations could be modified and a recommendation passed on to the City Council sometime in the future regarding possible changes. Director's announcements?
None at this point, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. On the commission agendas tonight, we have a discussion of the January 16th and February 20th regularly scheduled Planning Commission meetings, January 16th, 2012, February 20th, 2012, which are the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as well as President's Day holiday. This is our regular meetings typically fall on these days, and in the past we have just moved the meetings forward a week to the following Monday. But whatever your pleasure is, gentlemen. Anyone have any objection to moving it ahead 1 week on what would be January 23rd and February 27th? That'd be right? That'd be correct? Okay. Any objections to that? All right. Then I guess it has to be an action item next meeting then to do that?
No, you can actually, because it's listed on your agenda, you can actually take formal action.
Oh, we can?
Yes.
Well, all right then. It would be then a motion would be in order then to move the January meeting to January 23rd and the February meeting to February 7th, excuse me. So someone's going to make that motion. Mr. Terracciano made that motion, right?
Yes, I did.
And I second that.
Mr. Molly seconded that. So, please vote. Well, now you can vote.
Okay. Meetings are rescheduled as noted.
Thank you. Public business from the floor. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the commission on any subject regarding city business. Under state legislation, no action can be taken on non-agendized items. Members of the public should be aware of this when addressing the commission regarding items not specifically referred to in the agenda. Please complete a speaker's card for the recording secretary. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes each. I don't see anyone else in the audience. Anyone wishing to speak? Hearing none, then we stand adjourned to our special meeting for agenda review on Monday, October 10th at 5:30 p.m. in the planning conference room here at City Hall. Thank you very much.